Okay, here with Jim Barcelona, VP of Brokerage Services for At Properties, Christie's International, like specifically the Western Burbs. How you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good. Thanks for being here. Why don't you start by just letting us know how long you've been in the business and maybe why you got started in the business?
So kind of two elements to my real estate background. I've been started my career in commercial real estate. Spent 11 years selling apartment buildings throughout Chicagoland and the Midwest, and spent the last almost 10 years on the residential side of the business. So I'm a rare person who actually flipped from commercial to the residential side of the business.
Right. Now, do you think that that commercial background kind of helps you on the residential side? Like, are you able to use kind of some of the same tools? Because I know, like on the lending side, they're two different animals, right? Commercial and residential. So
For sure.
Yeah.
I think there's some similarities. I think anyone that has played around in both knows that the commercial side of the business is a little more analytical. The residential side of the business can be a little more emotional.
Yeah.
So I do definitely utilize sort of the data side to help sort of rationalize the emotional side of the residential business.
Well, speaking of the data driven, because I know that you like the numbers and you like, to speak to those. So do you think that the agents in this kind of market are more receptive to that kind of thing, just because I feel like they're hungrier now than they ever have been for knowledge like that?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, we're at a time right now where a lot of people, because of the COVID effect, couldn't necessarily make sense out of what was going on. There was some irrational exuberance, but I like to sort of ground everything in data, because ultimately, people are going to make emotional decisions, but they're not going to make completely irrational decisions. And the irrational decisions are grounded right by the data. Right. So as long as you can tie what is going on, what the growth has been in markets, you can tie it to something tangible. People may make a decision emotionally, but the data is going to backstop them.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. So you think, like, in this kind of market, what's your advice to agents on the buyer side and on the sell side about how to navigate through like what we're dealing with now?
Yeah, definitely. So if you look at the buy side of the equation, this moment in time right now, I'm a big fan of if I'm a buyer, because a lot of the homes that are on the market have sat a little while. Because a lot of people don't list, around the holidays. So the inventory that remains probably has something a little bit off, whether it be the condition, whether it be the location, whether it be the price. But what I find is motivation still is high this time of year. So I love being a buyer around the holidays, if I can be, because even though something's sitting, someone wants to get it sold, but you sometimes just don't look at it through the right lens.
True.
And it takes until the other inventory is gone to see what the opportunity is for the inventory that remains.
So I think what you said there is important, because now I feel like it's a really good time to be both a buyer and a seller, right? Because there's going to be so much pent up demand, right? So 6 months from now, you might be a buyer that thinks a house right now is overpriced, but it's probably going to be even more expensive 6 months from now, right? Because interest rates are going to come down. There's more buyers in the market driving the prices up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think that the message then to the seller is, don't try to just time it. It's not always perfect. I mean, your time frame is super, super important, but don't always think you have to time the spring market. That's the only time to list. If you're ready and your home is ready, go now.
Right.
There's still plenty of pent-up demand, to your point, that you'll still capitalize and create the best outcome.
Right, and I feel like trying to time something like that is like, it's like people trying to predict interest rates, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's impossible to do. So what do you think is your biggest challenge right now that you're dealing with, and just in terms of managing expectations of real estate agents? What's been your biggest challenge?
Certainly on the pure transactional side, the biggest challenge remains the imbalance between supply and demand. So there's a lot of, buyer anxiety, buyer fatigue. That still remains, because there's just not enough quality homes for the demand that's out there. So consequently, some people are sitting on the sidelines. Some people have exited the game. So that's the number one sort of transactional stress and anxiety. And then we have a lot of industry variables and factors
To
going
say
on
the
right
least,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, that have created some challenges. And so I think keeping everyone calm and recognizing that, we just have to be smarter and sharper and be a little bit clearer and concise in our communication with our clients to keep everyone at ease. That's my job, to make everybody calm and have those conversations appropriately.
Right. Well, I think you and your team have done such an awesome job, honestly, of navigating through the market and communicating all these new changes that are happening. And I think, honestly, this is something that I truly feel is specific to at properties. So do you think that there's one or two specific things that separates at properties from the rest?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a number of things, but I think there's some things we do uniquely well that separate us from the crowd. I always communicate in terms of different buckets, and I really think that the core buckets that differentiate us from the competition are, first-in-class marketing.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Our own proprietary technology suite that creates efficiencies for the agents, the training and coaching that's just at the highest level in the industry, and then sort of the dynamic culture that we have that we've seen from city to suburbs. Those are really the four buckets that differentiate us for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with at properties for 18 years now, and I feel like the culture that was there in 2005 when I started with them is that same culture. It's just now in a bigger environment, and
sure.
You guys have been able to kind of facilitate that and harvest that, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it's been fun because I've had the unique opportunity to expand in the west suburbs and bring, that suburban city culture out to the suburbs. So it's been really fun, and it translates really well.
Right. Now, do you think that has been a challenge at all, like transferring that same kind of city feel to the suburbs?
Yeah, no question. But I also think that the same agent is attracted to us in the city as in the suburbs, and that's the agent who values value and values kind of those four buckets at a high level that I just talked about.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that what I've witnessed specifically in the western suburbs and the growth is pretty awesome, because when at properties tends to go after a market, they tend to go after it pretty aggressively, right? Sure. And the goal is to be number one in that market. And within the span of a couple of years, right, pretty much every single market in the western suburbs, at properties is number one.
Yeah, we've been really fortunate in our growth. I mean, it's we've got a fabulous company and a brand behind us, and we've got the tools and technology to support it. Right. And we work pretty hard.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what advice would you give to your agents now who are working with maybe some people that are saying, I'm going to wait, right? What is the biggest piece of advice you give to the agents in that particular instance?
I think the question goes a little bit to the timing that you talked about. So it's very hard to time. So I guess the question would be, kind of what are you waiting for? What are the variables that would need to line up to make it a better time, right? So if I'm looking from a buyer perspective right now, I'm competing against less buyers right now than I will be in March, April, and May.
For sure.
So from an opportunistic standpoint, if I'm someone who cares about timing and finding the right house, I'd probably rather compete against less buyers than more buyers. So that, coupled with the recent tick down we've seen in interest rates, would get me off the sidelines and get me pretty motivated quickly.
Now, do you think there are certain areas in the western suburbs specifically that are have more room for growth?
I do. I think that you're going to continue to see. So I think the infill markets are going to come back stronger. I mean, I think that we're seeing a subtle shift, back to return to office. And so anytime you see acceleration in return to office, the train line becomes really valuable again. Sure. So I would say that when you look at the infill train line suburbs, that's where I think you'll see continued, pockets of growth. But I say that, and then the flip side is we're sitting here in St. Charles today, and St. Charles has probably fared as well as any submarket I can possibly think of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Fox Valley, Tri-City areas of St. Charles, Geneva, and Batavia. And it was fueled largely by the ability to work remote,
Right.
you know, and it was fueled by all the things we know from the pandemic, but we haven't seen it slow down. But if I had to put my money on where I think preservation of capital is best and growth, I'd still look back to the core train line suburbs.
Yeah. So we talk about being positive all the time. I know that's difficult to do in any market, really, especially in this business. But I feel like you've always maintained a high level of positivity, which I think kind of you exude that, and your agents kind of feed off of that. So how do you maintain that, good level of optimism for your agents?
I fake it.
Perfect answer.
Yeah. The truth is, in a leadership position, you have to have a positive take on it. Things can always be challenging. There's always a reason from news headlines or whatever to be negative or be pessimistic. But the reality is nobody wants to be around somebody who's that way, who's negative and pessimistic. So it's easy from that standpoint to be positive. But the other thing is when you look at those variables, I say, what's the opportunity? What's the potential? What's possible?
Yeah.
And that's what's exciting. And that's what I'm trying to work toward.
Well, don't you see a direct correlation between a positive agent and their actual production?
Without a doubt.
Right.
And it goes right to the heart of who do you want to work with?
Yeah.
Do you want to work with somebody who's exciting, who sees possibilities, who can present things to you in a new and exciting way?
Yeah.
Or do you want to, work with kind of the downer who's the naysayer and just sees negativity, and pessimism all around them? So yeah, that correlation to me is pretty obvious. But when you get in any business and you get in the thick of it, it's sometimes easy to lose sight of that.
Right. For sure.
And so you have to think about who brings you energy in your life, who do you want to surround yourself by, and so you see how that correlates.
That's awesome. So what would your last meal on earth be?
Oh gosh. Feels like a morbid question, but I think.
How about this? What's your favorite meal in the entire world?
Okay, the answer actually has become very, very simple after getting the chance to travel to Italy this past summer. And it's not one specific thing. The last meal is anywhere in Italy, period, end of story.
Right. Well, now you know why Italians were so happy, right? It's
There
because
you
it's
have
in
it.
our cuisine.
You got
Yeah.
it.
Awesome.
For sure.
Well, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, my
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Yeah, for sure.